'Twas the last podcast before Christmas, and the mics were hung by the desk with care, with hope that relatable, helpful, but mainly appropriate content would soon be there. Our one listener was waiting, their headphones held tight, for one final episode before Christmas night. Christmas is a time of joy for many, but it can also bring challenges and hardships, and not everybody's looking forward to it. Tonight, we're going to talk about Christmas in a bit more detail and think about how we can stay safe during the festive season. Welcome, everybody, to episode 2 of the Therapist in the Hot Seat podcast. Thank you so much for listening. And remember that you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, but also YouTube. And we appreciate every comment that's left. Before we get into our Christmas episode today, we're just going to start with some sad news. And that's unfortunately that we've come to learn of the passing of our friend and colleague, Steve Murray, who passed away last week. And some of the listeners of the podcast will know Steve, perhaps as a friend, or will have worked alongside him. And we really wanted to let Steve's family know that they are in our thoughts and in our hearts during this really difficult time of year. We can't even begin to imagine what you're going through right now. And we just wanted to nod to that and say, pay our respects and condolences. Tom, I don't know if you've anything you want to add.
Yeah, I always remember Steve, we'd always end up in Costa in High Wycombe at the same time, which was always a love, just by chance really, but he was always there and funny and had something kind to say. Very, very sad news. I think it's deeply affected a lot of us, a colleague and a friend. I will miss him greatly, and thoughts to the family.
It's really nice to hear your memories of him. Well, I've got loads of memories from the groups we used to do, but one was from a specific Christmas party that we had when back at Healthy Minds. I don't know if you were there, Tom, but Martin and I hired a room in this lodge where this Christmas party was taking place, and safe to say it got quite drunken and quite raucous, and we were up till 3 a.m. listening to Pink Floyd, and Steve was there. And it's funny because the picture just popped up on my Facebook the other day, and it was really nice to remember that. And it's a picture I'm going to save. And for everybody who wants to remember Steve and to pay their respects, I just want to let you know that on Wednesday, the 18th of December, there is a meeting at I think it's the Weaver's Arms in Aylesbury, which is near the Whiteleaf Centre, from 5:15 p.m. for anybody who wants to go along and come together and support each other. And if you would like any more information on that, I would encourage you to drop me a message either through Instagram or whatever, and we can put you in touch with Martin Bradshaw, who's hosting that and sorting all of that out. Thoughts again, Steve, with your family. Okay, and to move on from that, just to bring it back, we're always going to follow a CBT structure with our podcast. So to think, Tom, about bridging to our last experience, I wonder, what are your views on how it all went, and what's your experience been like since we put episode 1 out?
Yeah, it's always good to have a reflection between sessions, isn't it? As we said in our podcast, we were both absolutely bricking it beforehand. And I think that's, for me personally, marginally improved this time. I was explaining to Tom before this call, I was having all these stress dreams about missing my alarm and so forth. And I had a client before this and being late for them and just being in a real tiz, none of which came true, of course. And I think that's just indicative of us still getting used to the process. But in terms of the experience, actually doing the podcast was very, very, very fun, very easy, I would say, and the fallout in particular was superb. We've had loads of amazing feedback, we've had loads of great with lots of good figures, and we've also started putting out some content on Instagram, which just feels so, like, for me it feels really professional. And yeah, it's just not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I had one fear I really had about doing this is like my fear of like putting what's the phrase? Putting your head above the parapet, I think it is. Putting your face out there, basically. Being public with it and saying things that I suppose like your friends and family don't normally hear you say. They don't see you in a professional context. And what I learned is like either they don't care or they receive it well, and that's just been a lovely. We'll get into this more behavioural experiment for me personally. It's just been like a warm reception to putting something out into the world. That's not what my anxious brain told me was going to happen at all.
And isn't that interesting how the image that our brain paints before we do something is very different to what the actual outcome is? And I don't know about you, but I see that all the time happening in therapy. So a really important recognition there. And I just want to say a huge, huge thank you. I know I put a reel out on this, but to everybody who's listened, Tom's just pointed to the figures there. We are bowled over. We didn't expect this many people to listen to our first episode. And bearing in mind, this is not edited. This is just recorded in one session, just me and Tom going at it, and hearing the feedback from people and the likes on Instagram and things like that. I really, really appreciate it.
I can't walk down the street now, Tom, without getting
No, can you not?
It's like Beatlemania over here.
No, me neither. But they're just throwing stuff at me instead. They're going, move the mic away from your mouth. Stop breathing. Right. Yeah, so just a huge, huge thank you. And we're really excited about what the new year is going to bring for us. We've chosen Christmas as a topic today because it's so seasonal, it's so important, and so many people are going to be struggling. But in the new year, we've got so much coming. Some topics include motivation and low mood, anxiety and worry, acceptance, diffusion and the concepts of diffusion, and other third wave approaches to low self-esteem as well. And intrusive thoughts and OCD. And that's just to name a few. We're also really excited to have a few guests coming along. So we've got the topic of overcoming childhood trauma with my colleague and friend, Sarah Womand, who's going to be coming to talk about that. I know that will get a lot of interest. And my colleague Kate has agreed to come along and do a chat with us on nutrition and brain health, which I think would be really interesting. And one I'm really hoping to get over the line is sex addiction and pornography use with my good friends Caroline and Barry, who work in that area. So I'm just naming everybody to make them accountable. So then they now have to agree to me to do this. Some people have left me in their reds. You know who you are. Give me a message, reply, and we'll get you on our guest list as well. One last point before we get into today, because I'm rambling a bit, is we are going to have a mini-sode dropping around probably the 2nd of January. We'll probably let you enjoy your New Year's Day. But around the 2nd of January, we're going to have a mini-sode dropping, so please do keep an eye out for that. All right. Go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say with the mini-sode as well, I think it's going to link back to these first two episodes quite nicely. So, it's kind of like it's not rocket science thing with therapy. It's some nice key core concepts that are going to continue throughout these conversations. So hopefully it's accessible for people as well.
Yeah. Fantastic. And Tom, what you were saying about nerves, I was feeling really nervous at the start. I didn't want to mess up that little intro. I knew we were going to talk about some difficult stuff. But it's dropping away now, so here we go. Let's enjoy it.
You've broken the back of the thing, I think.
I have.
Yeah.
I have. Well, we'll see if it comes back. We'll see if my back reforms. Okay, so remembering with each session with CBT, we'll start with an agenda. So that's really an outline of what we're going to cover today. So I thought, Tom, we'd start maybe just by having a bit of a chat about Christmas. Yeah. Just in general, what Christmas is like and how that works. And then maybe we can think about how it's going to be tough for some people and maybe move into what we can think about doing that might help us on Christmas Day.
Definitely. That sounds good to me. So should we start with a check-in then to see where we're both at with Christmas?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's not far away now.
God, it's coming quickly. Personally then, so I've had this weird anti-tradition of Christmas where I haven't really celebrated it for I haven't formally celebrated Christmas for a long time, at least not in my house. I don't actually own any Christmas decorations, and I haven't done it for about 4 or 5 years, for no other reason than it just hasn't felt very necessary. Either I'm living on my own, or just not been in a particularly good place, and it just hasn't really felt worth it. This year, however, my niece got me for Christmas, and I've already opened it, which I probably shouldn't have done. It's just a simple little box of shortbreads, and that box is a little Santa thing. And it's not much, but I just put it on my mantelpiece, and I've got a few Christmas cards. And it's the first time I've really done anything formally Christmassy in my own home for a very long time, and that feels like a little spark there, which is nice.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It was good.
And look, thank you for sharing that, because we didn't talk about that beforehand. In fact, we haven't talked about a lot of this stuff beforehand, but we didn't talk about that, and I didn't know that. And I think that takes a lot of courage to say, I haven't fallen into Christmas as everybody else does over the past few years, and this year there is actually a bit of a nod to Christmas in my house. But and it takes a lot to say. Perhaps I haven't been in the right place. Perhaps I haven't been very festive, and I'm
Mm,
sure a lot of people will relate to that as well.
mm. Yeah, and it's not how I want to be, you know. I'm looking forward to the time when I feel it's right to change that, and I think it will happen. But yeah, I haven't forced it upon myself for several years. Happy to go along for like work drinks and etc. Well, I'm self-employed now, so it's just a bit sad. But when I was in the team, it's nice to go along for work drinks and take up some of the festivities. But
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of had a little Grinchy phase, I suppose. But no,
Maybe
it's
we'll
been.
organise some online podcast drinks. Maybe we'll have a drink on. Maybe we'll record it. How does that sound? We'll get Mads on. Oh, drunken therapists at Christmas. Right. We'll see how we feel about that
Yeah,
afterwards.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, but with regards to getting ready, have you been buying presents? Are
Mm.
you all prepared?
Actually, yeah. My New Year's resolution, we'll come on to this in the mini-sode, but last year's New Year's resolution was just to be a better like member of the family. And what I did is I bought a kind of like a little shoebox thing, and I filled it with Christmas cards and birthday cards and some basic generic presents so that I'd stop not sending cards to people because I'm just terrible at doing that. And I kind of like can't be bothered. But I didn't like that about myself. I really wanted to engage. I think I noticed my values had shifted towards
Mhm.
friends and family, and I decided to hold myself accountable to engaging with that more. And this year has been exactly the same. I've already posted, because I'm going away for Christmas. I've already posted all my family's presents and cards off to them,
Wow.
and
Wow.
I just felt I had a little pile of them wrapped up, and I went to the post office. Cost about 15 quid, but that's another story for another time.
Mm,
Um, but I got them all off, and I just thought, at the very least, they're going to be really happy when they receive that. And
wow.
I enjoyed that. That was a
That
nice
must
thing
feel
to do.
good. That must feel
Mm,
really good.
it
I
did.
I don't feel very prepared at all, and I always feel so guilty when Christmas cards come through the door because I think, gosh, I'm probably not going to send one back.
Well, that
um,
strikes you off my list.
yeah. No, I appreciate yours. Genuinely, I do. My son loves them, but yeah, no, I think, gosh, when am I going to have time to do that? So I think, planning. And I was in the shower this morning. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's the 10th already. Where am I going to get time to get all these presents ordered and delivered and wrapped and out? And every time I ask my wife what she would like me to send off to Santa for her, she just always goes on to tell me how much she hasn't got me, which isn't helpful because I still don't know what to buy. So yeah, it's a tough one. So I really don't feel ready for Christmas, if I'm honest. I'm working a lot. I don't really have a lot of time. So hopefully I can free something up maybe the week before. But I'm certainly not a Christmas Ever. One of those people who's sort of walking around High Wycombe Eden Centre Christmas Eve. Sort of, what can I buy? And luckily, I'm not quite that bad.
Yeah, I'm too type A for that. I'm much more of the sort of person who I sort of relax only when I've got things done, you know. So yeah, I'm unfortunately not one of those either. I couldn't deal with the stress, quite frankly.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And have you been doing anything festive? Have you watched any Christmas films or anything?
Hmm. No, I don't think so. But oh, actually, is drinking Baileys alone considered festive?
Absolutely. In the dark?
Fantastic. And I've been incredibly, incredibly festive.
Wow.
Yeah, my
You,
brother
yeah.
got me a litre of Baileys, and then I'm a little ashamed to
Mm,
say it was gone within a week.
yeah.
Honestly, I don't know what they put in that stuff. As soon as I got home from work, I was like, well,
Mm,
it's like 5:30. I might have a Baileys, and then like
yeah.
one becomes three, and then
It's the alcohol, Tom. That's what they're putting in it. It's the alcohol. But no, it's very Moorish, isn't it? But I can't drink
yeah.
sort of more than one, otherwise I start feeling
Mm.
it. But I always remember a comedian making a joke about this. Who say I can't remember who it was, but she said, "My mother and I at Christmas always have a Bailey's in its appropriate measurement, which is half pints." So yeah, and I don't know what happens at Christmas with Baileys. It's like the price crashes if you're in the Baileys stock market. Sell before Christmas because they're selling for £22 a bottle before, and then at Christmas you can get them for like a tenner. So yeah, that doesn't help with staying within our units, Tom, does it? Um, Great. Okay, so a bit of Baileys for you. That's nice.
And yourself, anything festive going on?
Not really. We put our tree up last Sunday, so a few
Yeah.
days ago, and we watched a Christmas film the other day. It was one of these new ones on Netflix. It was called That Christmas. Unfortunately, being a therapist, when you watch those kind of things, you kind of pick it apart a bit, don't you? And there was a a part of it where the family, the parents get stuck. They've decided to go away on Christmas Eve for the night, and they get stuck in the snow, and they're there for a good 24 hours before they find a mobile phone. And rather than calling for a welfare check on the poor children who've been left on their own from Christmas Eve all the way through Christmas Day, they call for help themselves. And then when they get home, have a go at the children. So I was thinking, this is not great for parenting. This is not. I was thinking about
Safeguarding anyone.
all the trauma that those poor kids were going through. So I wasn't watching it through very festive eyes, but I have tried. I've certainly tried. And what's Christmas Day like for you? What do you normally get up to on the day itself?
Oh, look. Oh, I tell you, actually, probably the coolest Christmas day imaginable to man. So 2 years ago, this isn't my average one, of course, but I'm just gonna gloat. I did some backpacking and I was in Vietnam. And time just sort of went on, and before I knew it, it was Christmas, and it's quite hot in Vietnam during Christmas. And I decided to do this as a motorbike tour.
Oh,
And in the
great.
north of Vietnam, you've got these mountains. It's called the Hao Giang Loop, and it's like a 4 day. It's like think of Lord of the Rings. It's that epic. The mountains, the views, the crystal clear waters, and you just do this motorbike thing, and you stop off in these hostels along the way. And it wasn't until Christmas Day that I actually noticed the date, and I sort of checked in with myself, and I was like, "This is the coolest day of my life." And there was I saw a Christmas tree outside the hotel, and I was like, "Oh my God, yeah!" And I was like, "Oh my God, it's Christmas!" I hadn't even thought about it.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so your question was, what's your normal one? That wasn't my
Yeah.
typical one, but it was like I look back on it so fondly. It was
Mm,
like,
sounds great.
yeah.
Did you have your own motorbike?
No, you just rent them. So
Ah,
the laws are like very flexible. So you can either choose to show your driving license, which I have, or
or
pay the
not?
equivalent of about £25. And I was like, I'm just going to pay it just because,
Yeah.
YOLO. Paid it, and then you just rent the bike, and then you return the bike in 4 days, and it was
Right.
that was it. And I lost loads of sleep. So I was like, oh, what if I get there and I can't do this, and I'm worried about that? What about
Interesting.
insurance? None
Interesting.
of that. Straight in.
A lot of hypothetical worries going on there. Well, a lot of
Oh
what ifs.
yes. Oh yes.
Isn't it funny how we can relate everything back to that? Wow. Okay, cool. Yeah, so that sounds amazing. Sounds
Yeah.
surreal.
Yeah, it was. It really, really was.
Mm.
How about yourself? What's a typical day for you?
Before children or
Yeah.
before a child?
Well, let's do both. Let's get the
Yeah,
comparison.
before a child, getting home at 4 a.m. Christmas Eve, getting woken up with a camcorder in my face at about 6 o'clock, saying we have to go open the presents. 2 Prosecco's, 3 Prosecco's, 4 down, in bed by 11 a.m., I think, for a nap. Now it's much more sensible. So yeah, getting up, still have a prosecco in the morning, but only one, and open the presents, and then before you know it, it's dinner time and finishing with Gavin and Stacey, isn't it? It's very
Yeah. Yeah.
very homely, I suppose.
Yes. That's nice. That's very
Hmm.
nice. You keep it just a little the inner circle of family, do you? Do you
Yeah,
keep
no.
it
So
quite
we
small?
have to open it up, sadly. So
Uh,
I'm sorry, I shouldn't say sadly because they're probably going to listen. But no. So my wife's family are coming. So mother-in-law, father-in-law, brother-in-law, brothers-in-law, and all the dogs. So yeah,
Lovely.
and should be nice. We don't know if anybody else is joining us yet. There's room for more if they wanted to, but we're still waiting to find out.
Mm.
So yeah, no, great. Okay, so look, we all have our own experiences of Christmas, don't we? And I wonder if we can just use this to segue into the idea that, as you've already touched on, Tom, Christmas isn't always wonderful. Even for us who have those homely Christmases, there are still challenges within that. Just because it alone itself is, from the outside looking in, looking like a nice time, we can have our own internal struggles. So Christmas itself, the time of year can be a real struggle, but also the day itself. And that can be for a number of reasons, whether it's the financial pressures all around it, the fears of loneliness and feeling like an outsider, especially if I don't have the network that other people might have around this time of year. Also, it's a lot darker. It's a lot colder. So, our mood might be affected by what's going on in the weather. And there can also be a lot of expectations. And if we're not feeling well anyway, the idea that just because it's Christmas, I can jump out of my mood and be happy and chirpy isn't really very fair. So, Tom, I know you've been doing a lot of sort of thought around this, haven't you? I wonder if you want to build on any of those points.
Yeah, I think all of them are really important. God, where to start? I think the thing I'd like to focus in on most is the concept of expectations versus reality, and I don't think there's a time of year when it's more like important. For whatever reason, I suppose Christmas is just such a big deal. But also, it's in the media. We see it. It's the John Lewis adverts as well, and the Aldi one, I think, now as well. But we get a lot of information which tells us that Christmas is this incredibly special, heartwarming, family-oriented, peaceful time. Um, but and I hope it is, but obviously that to have that expectation is almost to doom yourself to failure because there's going to be so many factors and variables which you cannot control, which undermine that sense of how it should be. And I think that's when people really get into choppy water is they have a preconception about what this time of year is going to be like for them or how their life will be in this moment, and they're just hit with like the reality slap of this isn't, I don't feel right, or I'm estranged, or I'm ill, or I'm alone. And then if those things weren't bad enough, it's just compounded by that sense of distance between what it should, I'm putting that in inverted commas for our listeners, be.
Mm.
And the greater the discrepancy between expectations and reality, I think generally the greater the suffering, and the volume is turned right up over Christmas. So, what I wanted to talk about in this part really is just noticing what our expectations are and some consideration into where they come from, and then maybe in our next section we can talk a little bit about how we could effectively manage that.
Mhm.
Um,
Shall we break some of these down then? Shall we look at
yeah.
some of these? I mean, I use just use the term reality slap, which I think is amazing. I mean, if I just
Mm,
think about my life, the amount of times that I've had these goggles on about how things should be or ought to
yeah.
be, and then how I felt really disappointed, I
Yeah.
suppose, when it's not met that for me. And I'm not saying it always has to be about materialism, but sometimes it's about feelings. It's about, I'm not feeling connected to this, and I'm not feeling like I'm with this.
Definitely.
And that can be really isolating.
That's actually a really good point. I think like we can fall into that way of almost. I find I treat my emotions a bit like a compass. I kind of think like, oh, I should be feeling like this. It's how I sort of interpret my surroundings. But if your feelings aren't as you thought they were going to, that I think you used the word isolation is so true. If you don't feel Christmassy and everyone else does, or you don't feel gregarious than other people are, it feels so much worse in that moment. Anyway, sorry, that was a ramble. You
No,
should
no,
have
it's
held me back
fine,
there, Tom.
fine. No, no, no,
That
no,
was your
no. That's
responsibility.
not what this is about, Tom. This is about, two therapists going wild, right?
There's
So,
not tea in this mug, I'll tell you that much.
no,
It is Bailey's.
maybe. Okay. So, I mean, look, should we start with one of these? Should we talk about financial pressures?
Yeah, yeah. How would you like to do? I think you had quite a good example earlier. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, isn't it? I mean, depending on the expectations, what you want to do, it can be so financially challenging at this time of year because it's a short month anyway. People generally get paid earlier, and that makes January a long month. And you're thinking, gosh, I've got to buy these presents for everybody, and am I spending enough? Is this enough for them, or am I being too tight, or do I need to loosen my purse strings a little bit? And I know, definitely I'm looking at, we're hosting Christmas this year, and the amount of money that's going into just getting everything in for the day, right? The food, the alcohol, the chocolates, the crackers, the cheese, the everything, it was all mounting up. And then on top of that, having to buy, gifts and presents and things like that is a big, big pressure. So, it is a big struggle, and it is a worry. So, especially, when you look ahead into January and there's other expectations of you then as well, especially for me. So, yeah, so we had a really good way of managing this one year, which I'll go into a little bit later, but I just want to acknowledge the kind of the financial pressures as well.
Yeah, yeah. Just to echo what you said about like that sense of I should have spent more. Have I spent enough? Which like it's a crazy way to sort of judge thought and effort is like financially, but I think that does crop up for so many people, and then we can feel pressured into making purchases that aren't necessary. They're not going to improve anything about that day per se. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just lining the pockets, aren't we, of the corporate world who love.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound too cynical, but people, people who love making sales and marketing and make a lot of their money at this time of year that keep them buoyant for the rest of the year.
Yeah.
So yes, there's a lot of economic pressure there.
Loneliness and family estrangements.
Mm.
Massive, 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 massive topic. I think we could spend not just one podcast on it, but many. Um, Christmas is, yeah, like we said, the expectation I think is like one of family time. But if you think about it, there's a reason you moved out. It wasn't just uni or your first job. There's a reason you left home, and often it's you've outgrown those traditional roles that you used to be a part of. You weren't a teenager anymore, you're an adult, and sometimes it's hard to almost like fully spread your wings whilst you're still in those households. So when you return to those family dynamics, it can feel like your wings are being clipped a little bit, and it can be really difficult to reintegrate yourself into that dynamic, which you may have, like I said, outgrown. Estrangements can lead from that as well, just not having contact with family for long periods of time for those reasons. So it can be really challenging to sort of like fit yourself back into that box.
Mm.
Um, Loneliness as well is if you are in those boxes, even when you're so if you're not with people, that can be lonely, but even when you are with people, that can be lonely as well. I think Robin
Absolutely.
Williams said that. He said one of the
Yeah.
worst feelings is not to be lonely, it's to be around people that make you feel lonely.
Mm. Absolutely.
So true. Because at least
Mm.
when if you're just physically on your own, you can be self-focused, you can like just do you.
Mm.
But if you're with people and you feel alone, that is just
Yeah.
I don't know what the words are for that. Just
Well, it's when you're in your internal world feeling like an alien, right? Because
yeah,
everybody else is, appearing to be engaging and with it, and there's me thinking, "Gosh, I don't fit here," and
yeah,
this idea that we then compare ourselves to that, and when we compare ourselves, we are sadly able to compare 100% of ourselves, how we feel, how we think, how we look, everything, to what other people allow us to see, which is
mm,
probably what 5-10% of their
yeah,
actual experience.
yeah,
So that can even be even more isolating.
yeah,
Yeah. But I completely agree with you. That idea of, we've all had Christmases where we have to go and stay with family, and all of a sudden you're having to live in line with those rules and those, the expectations, and you have to move into a different bedroom and live out of a suitcase and things like that. It can be really challenging.
mm,
Um, so yeah, that's certainly one reason why Christmas isn't great for everybody. A third one, Tom, is just generally the time of year. Christmas falls
yeah,
at quite a dark, wintry time in this hemisphere at least, and we know that there is, and we certainly see it in our clinical work, don't we? A lot of people start struggling at this time of year with their mood and anxieties.
yeah. And it's so unfortunate that well, to be very blunt, therapy does cost money. It is an investment, and it comes at the time when people would need that the most is also the time when we're so financially obligated elsewhere. So it's a really unfortunate coincidence, actually. Um, but to have, what we call seasonal affective disorder or SAD when I was doing a bit of research actually. So some research said it's to do with a vitamin C deficiency, but other research says that you can have it during the summertime as well. So it's a bit of not quite sure, it's not quite a clearly defined term, but the winter blues, I think, is how I sort of phrase it to people. And it's because you wake up and it's dark and you leave the house and it's cold
Mm.
and you tend to be more introverted because you don't really want to go out. Or if you do go out, it's probably to the pub and then you end up, drinking too much or spending too much and hangover and so forth. And it's a real hotbed, I think, for sort of like depressogenic tendencies to come through. Um, and it's worth labeling that in ourselves, like just knowing that we're almost it's easier to trip up during this time of year for those reasons, I think.
I think it's probably quite telling that a lot of the most oppressive dark black metal comes out of the northern Scandinavian countries where
I'm
there's
moving there.
where there's 3 months
I'm
of
going.
mountain. Tom, just go there, take your Baileys, lock yourself in a basement, and thrash out some black metal. And But yeah, no, I think just, the idea of opportunities decreasing, even if it's not, the actual darkness itself, opportunities decreasing and, daylight hours being limited makes things harder, and we can feel a bit more demotivated with all that. So it was just a nod to that, really. And I definitely see it in my clinical work. This time of year, there's a bit of an increase in that demotivation, maybe a bit more space for those dark and more negative, anxious thoughts popping in.
Yeah.
And so it's important to think about what we do with that and how we manage that as well.
Yeah, because one I'm not sure if I call it a theory, but I suppose one sort of consideration for depression is it's like a little bit like a hibernation. It's protective of the self that's withdrawing from the
Yes. Yeah.
pressures
Yeah.
and challenges, and it is kind of like finding yourself on the sofa under a blanket, eating, carbohydrates basically, and really just cocooning yourself away. And that's sort of what you do naturally during the winter months. It does feel like, I mean, I certainly do. I watch more films and I spend more time just like being on my own, and that's okay, but it does overlap in a Venn diagram sense with what would typically lead to depression. So it's so important to stay vigilant, I think, with our own experiences.
Absolutely. You just reminded me of the analogy "happy cavemen get eaten." You heard that one?
No, tell me.
There's a wonderful YouTube video on this from Russ Harris, one of the
Love him.
leading figures in
Yeah.
acceptance and commitment therapy. But just the idea that, well, partly one of the reasons why we are struggling with our mental health in our society today and in our civilization is because happy cavemen who didn't struggle with these anxieties and depression got eaten because they were out there. They were less caring. They were kind of out there, not protecting themselves, taking risks, and therefore they were attacked by the lions and tigers and saber-tooths and things, and trampled by mammoths back in the day. Whereas the quieter, more reserved, bit more cautious, anxious cavemen and people, sorry, we should say cave people, were more at the back of the cave, kind of protected. So if anything did come around that area, they were hidden away, or they were able to protect themselves because they were in a confined space, so they could get their spears there. And so it's the idea that perhaps, maybe this depression, this anxiety is linked to safety and survival and hibernation, I suppose. This idea that, taking downtime and doing that. So it's important for us to think about restoration. We're not saying restoration is a bad thing, but I suppose making sure we're doing it for the right reasons.
That's lovely, lovely theory. I hadn't thought of it like that, and it does explain a lot. I will tell you that much.
I'll send you
So
the
we're all
video.
kind of statistically, survival goes up, and we're descended from the people that were more reserved and not the risk takers, so forth. So and that kind of came down through the genetics and things.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Cool. That's useful.
Okay, so we've had to think about what Christmas is like for us. We've had to think about why Christmas isn't great for everybody, whether they are on their own or whether they are as a part of a family but feeling isolated in other ways, or if there are other pressures. So I wonder if we can start thinking about a few strategies just for for 10 minutes or so, about how we can start to keep well at Christmas.
Yeah, I thought I'd start off with a vignette, if that's okay.
Fire away, go ahead.
It is about myself, so it is also a projection. And I won't give too much details because the viewers. But there was one Christmas a few years ago, and I was sort of there out of obligation more than desire. But that's okay, I suppose that's part of family life, as you sort of go for these things sometimes. But I got there and I did feel very out of place, and I felt very uncomfortable, and just deeply different and estranged. I felt estranged and, of course, lonely. And I did like what anyone in that frame of mind would do, which is just stay in bed and doom scroll. Um,
Gosh.
of course, what was I hit with? And I'm happy for these people, of course, but it was just like matching pajama selfie after matching pajama selfie after, and it was just this like perfect, I don't know how to describe it, like Dickensian sort of like image of Christmas just beaming at me through my Facebook app. Um, and although that is, of course, full of good cheer and positivity, there's nothing like other people's good cheer and positivity to make you feel even worse when you're already at your lowest ebb. Because it's that whole like, oh, I should be feeling different, my life. Why isn't my life like that? And so forth. And, you just kind of like really, really, really hit rock bottom. So, sorry, Tom, are we moving into the what
Yeah,
to
so
do
we're
about
going
this
to go into the
stage?
kind of strategies for keeping
Ah,
well aspect, but you've just hit a really important point of this
okay.
idea that we can get, if we are struggling, we get dragged into the dopamine center, basically, which is social media, right? And again, it comes back to that comparison aspect, the fact that we are comparing 100% of our own experiences to what people allow us to see. And what you don't see, Tom, when they're putting together that wonderful Christmas pajama photo is the run up to that, which is 10 minutes of, James, get down here. Come on, we're getting a photo. I don't care if you want a photo. It's Christmas. We're not going to have many Christmases. Right, you don't see that. I could go on like that forever. You don't get all that because all you see is this bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this idea that, oh my gosh, everybody else is having this perfect, pristine Hallmark movie Christmas, and here's sort of me feeling detached, disconnected, like I really don't want to be here, is something. So is there some sort of strategy here then? Do we need to be careful when we're on social media?
For sure. I think it's how you use it. I mean, obviously, social media is, I suppose, arguably about connecting people. Ironically, it can also do the exact polar opposite for the reasons we've just spoken about. But I think it depends on how you use it. So I can't remember exactly how I ended up there, but I heard of this hashtag that people can use on Twitter. For people who feel lonely at Christmas, and I think it's a comedian called Sarah something. She's like a northern comedian. It was her thing, and you go on there and you look and you see. And what I found is it's like not only was I not alone, I would argue I was suddenly in the majority. I mean, I don't know the stats, but it was thousands of tweets all the time, all day, and it was like I'm feeling like this. I'm having a bad day. This is rubbish. I'm really struggling, and then inundated with like useful, warming comments. And I thought, it does feel like I'm alone because the context I'm in. I am sort of alone. This house I'm in, I am feeling alone, and the people I'm with, I do feel alone around them. But like, I'm on my own with millions of other people, and you can kind of use like technology in this instance, social media. I was sort of too depressed to get out of bed, I would say, but I was able to use my phone to really my advantage. And before I knew it, I felt like I felt seen. And I didn't think I even wrote anything. I may have commented a little bit, but I just thought like, yeah, this is all I needed is to understand that I am actually still part of a network of people, if you like.
So there's something here about connection then in some
Massively.
way, whether if it's not directly where I'm at physically, it's how do I connect in other ways through things like using social media for the good in this way, or using these hashtags and allowing myself to be supported by those, but also using our friends and being real with each other, even if we're connecting and sending a WhatsApp and, hey, how's your day going? It doesn't have to be all wonderful. We can be honest, can't we? And say, it's been interesting, but we're getting on. What are you doing next? And getting support where we need it. It could be from those immediately around you. It could be about opening up and saying, you know what, I'm here, but I'm struggling. Can we do something to change this? And we're going to talk, a little bit later about how we can think about living in line with our values. How do we make sure that we're making Christmas about what's important? But yeah, seeking connection, not being afraid to be honest and saying, look, this is tough. This isn't a Hallmark movie for me today. Whether
Yeah.
that's in person or online.
Yeah, and I think the good thing about being honest is like it's that whole thing. When you even with like clients, you sit down, you go, "How's it going?" And everyone's first reaction to that question is exactly the same. I'm really good, thanks. How are you? It's like, well, you sat in my therapy chair, so maybe we should try that again. How are you really doing? And then you just open up that little surface bit and then you dive on in and it's like, okay, so you're not doing very well. And actually that's just a shared human experience. So don't for a second think because people say like, yeah, I'm good, thanks, that's the end of the conversation. And I think if you dug a little bit deeper, you would see that authenticity. You could connect on that authenticity and realize you are so not alone if you're having a difficult day. So if you do decide to open up to a friend or a loved one, I would urge you just to go just to sort of sit with that a little bit longer and just go a little bit deeper, and I think you'll find your experiences are far more similar than they are different, and then you can understand you're not on your own with it, and it's okay to not be okay. I mean, it's not even it's just inevitable that you're not going to be okay, and I think everyone's going to be feeling that to some degree over this period of time.
Great.
Yeah.
So I think we've ticked off one of our points there, which is about seeking connection, whether that's from those around us and trying to share our experiences and being honest, or whether it's through other communities, whether that's Twitter or social media, but trying to make sure
Yeah.
we're using that well rather than falling into the trap of comparison.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Hmm.
Great. So another one of our ideas for strategies to keep well, Tom, was setting boundaries.
Mm.
So this, I think, is a really important one. When we're talking about setting boundaries around Christmas and on the day itself, what are we talking about? What do we mean? Oh, sorry, I think we've had a connection issue there.
Yeah, sorry, the Wi-Fi wobbled a little bit, so sorry if there's a bit of lag. I think I think boundaries, I mean there's so many. I suppose I'll probably focus in on the like interpersonal boundaries you can have with people. Um, and I'm a pretty introverted person, and
I
that
think Tom's
means,
having a few Wi-Fi issues, so I think I'm going to jump in here.
oh,
If you
sorry.
can still hear me, are you back, Tom?
I am back. Yeah, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah. This is the raw cut. This is the riff, right?
This is how you know. It's
Yeah.
live-ish. Yeah, let me just revisit that point. Let me know if it wobbles again. So I was saying one thing I would like to speak about on this part is boundaries interpersonally, and the reason why that means a lot to me is because I'm a very introverted person, despite my carefree, happy-go-lucky facade. See, deep down, I need a lot of time on my own to recharge, and that's fine. Christmas doesn't really afford you that. It's kind of the opposite. You're kind of expected to be on, bubbly, and present and so forth, pun intended. Um, what I found in order to survive that one day or few days that you're with people is to draw those boundaries, and that means like protecting your own space and not being afraid to say no if you don't want to do something, not being afraid to take yourself off, whether to go for a walk or just change of scene or new faces or just back up to your room for a little bit. So for a boundary I would recommend for people is to really know your own personal limits, to do with introversion and extroversion, or just to do with your energy that particular day, and to kind of like don't violate that, like don't give it away if you haven't got it to give. Look after yourself, almost like protect your mental space on that day. That to me would be a really important place for a boundary to go.
Mm, mm.
What do
So
you think, Tom? Where do
yeah,
boundaries go for you, do you think?
I agree. I think there's as we've already mentioned, there's a lot of expectation around being there, being around, being on top of things, being happy, and I think having that one word that came up for me when you were talking, Tom, is courage. I think it takes a lot of courage
Mm,
to say, actually, no, I am going to protect myself here. And look, if you got a new PlayStation game for Christmas, say, do you mind if I just nip off for 10, 15 minutes and try this out? Or actually, you know what? The dogs haven't been walked yet. And so I'm going to go take the dogs out before we have dinner. This idea of thinking about what do I need and saying no. And that doesn't always mean being away from people. Of course it doesn't. But just thinking, actually, I'm not going to get involved in that beer pong, actually, because I don't think it's going to serve me at this point in time. So I'm going to go and just look after myself for a moment, and realizing that it's okay to say no without any consequence. Really, we might get a little bit of okay, no worries. We might feel a little bit guilty, but perhaps people are much more understanding and accepting, especially if we've, touching on our previous point, been a bit honest about how things are. Then people are probably okay to think, okay, well, that's fine. I know for me, I won't bring too much of myself into this, but I know this year Christmas is going to be a real challenge for me for various reasons. And I know I'm going to need time. So I will probably take the dogs out for a little bit longer. I probably will, disappear up for a bit of a longer shower or something like that, and that's okay. I think just acknowledging that these are our needs, and these people are still going to be there for us afterwards, and we can still get engaged afterwards. Just because I take a moment away, it doesn't mean that I'm not going back as well.
yeah, that's really important. I think as well, the more I kind of speak to people, I do try to actually be quite open with people. Obviously, given our profession, I kind of try to, yeah, display that. But the more I speak to people, the more I realize that people always feel like that as well. Like it's quite a rare person that can be on and sort of like present all day. And if you reflect on the fact that you probably wouldn't judge someone else for taking some time to themselves, you might even envy it or respect it. Hopefully, we can kind of put that back on us and convince ourselves that no, it's people aren't gonna be upset with us or disappointed if we just protect our mental space a little bit. In fact, that might be what I need in order to be able to come back down and join the family in a, a meaningful and pleasurable way. So yeah, like courage to do that and remembering that it's not, you're not going to be judged for it at all. I don't think people would judge anyone for that. Or I hope they wouldn't.
Fantastic, fantastic. And that kind of segues us into self-care ideas. So if we are setting boundaries around, not just on Christmas Day, but generally, I think it's important that we take time to soothe ourselves. And Paul Gilbert talks about this wonderfully in his compassion-focused therapy work, and the idea that we have these three systems that we go between, which is our drive system, which is our go-getter. It's the drive system that's getting all the gifts sent out on time, Tom, for you, and your cards all done, and all the food in and everything ready. So we've got this drive system, but we've also got this threat system, which is the idea that I should, I must, I ought, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. How am I going to cope? And that's linked to a lot of adrenaline and cortisol. And in this theory, they also talk about this soothing system, which as humans, we tend to neglect significantly. We tend to be very, very driven or very, very threatened, or even driven in a threatened way, like me when, I can fit another session in this week, no problem. So I've got a big tax bill in January. Yeah, I'm doing this for the right reasons. No, I just don't soothe myself, right? So the idea that I need to take my time to soothe and to think about what that is. And when we think about soothing, we're thinking about tapping into our body's natural oxytocin resource. So, what are these kind of things that really help me relax and recover and recuperate? A lot of people think that soothing is sitting down, scrolling through social media. And sadly, it's not, because when we're going through social media, that's linked to dopamine hits. So that's actually playing into our drive system. That's when we're comparing. Sorry, that seems to be the theme of today, Tom. That's when we're comparing. So instead, we need to think about genuinely what soothes us. So for me, it'll be a hot bath with a candle, or just time when my son can't get to me. The door's shut, or it might be in a field with my dogs, and they're just running around, and I'm just watching them. And I'm peaceful, and I'm contented, and I'm exactly where I need to be, where and when. So, yeah, those are some of my ideas for self-care. I think taking time to soothe is important.
Can I ask a quick question, Tom?
Of course, yeah.
Feel free if you don't want to answer it.
It's
But
all right.
what are there any internal blocks that come up
Oh, yeah.
for you? What would they be, do you think? What kind of things you come up
Oh,
against?
all the time, Tom. Again, it's these kind of very fixed, negative, absolute thoughts of you must be doing this, you should be doing it this way, you should be having fun, you shouldn't be relaxing, you've got so much stuff you need to do. That guilt that comes with self-care and soothing. And I've found that the times when I've really been able to soothe myself is when I've been forced to do so. I'm in a foreign country, I haven't got my emails, I'm sat, eating seafood and looking out at the sea, and I tap into it then. I think it's something that I have to make more of a conscious effort with, is to say, I'm allowed to soothe myself. Thank you for these thoughts. But if I go along with these, then I'm just going to stay in my threat and driven mode, and that's going to probably drive me down the wrong path. So it's about kind of acknowledging and noticing those barriers, to taking time for me and allowing myself, give myself permission to say, look, this is only 20 minutes. I'm allowed 20 minutes for myself here.
Yeah, because I suppose as well, I don't know too much about Paul Gilbert's work, because I am kind of aware of it, but I don't know the ins and outs of it. But is it the case then that if you don't find time for soothing and you're always like goal oriented or threat oriented, I suppose burnout is waiting around the corner for you?
Yeah. As humans, we've kind of overdeveloped this, right? We're always go-getter, get the better job, get the better car, get the better Christmas presents, to bring it back on track, whatever. And or we're very threatened, like, oh, that person's got a better car than me, or that person answered that question better than me, oh, Tom's a better podcast host than me, right?
Don't feel bad. You'll get there.
I'll get there. Soothe me, Tom. Soothe me. And we're always oscillating between being very driven and very threatened. Whereas if I look behind me now at my two dogs, they've had their food, they've exercised enough. They could do with a bit more, I'll be honest, but they've exercised enough. They've had their food, and what do you think they're doing? You can probably hear them. They're snoring, right? But we're not like that. If I'm fed and watered and then I've got everything I need, I'm thinking, cool, what's next? What's next? What's next? And that's when we do go into that burnout, because we're driven in threatened ways, right? And I'm not saying yes to another session because I think that will be good for me clinically. I'm saying yes because that can help me pay my tax bill. So yeah, we can go to them burnout, and I think it's just important to acknowledge and recognize that, and take steps that might be uncomfortable to say no. I need to calm down. I need to slow down, but maybe it's what we need.
Yeah. I think it's a really great message, that, and a lovely, quite clear, quite simple, or I'm sure there's a lot going on under the surface, model for understanding the human experience. Um, and I think it's going to be, I think probably I'll take a shot in the dark, but 9 times out of 10, it's the soothing one that people neglect or feel they're not able to access in that moment for whatever reason because they're busy and so forth. And I wonder, yeah, I suppose over Christmas how we can touch base with that. So I guess identifying what it is that soothes you and making yourself feel okay that you're going to be soothed as well.
Yeah, and
Um,
it takes some getting used to, right? Because we
yeah,
neglect our soothing system. It really is like this little green pea in the corner,
yeah,
whereas the drive system is a much bigger circle, and the threat system is like this great big Mercury red planet, right? It's alien to us. We have to, allow ourselves to do it and exercise our soothing. And the more we exercise
yeah,
it, the more we'll be able to do it. And just to bring this back in line with Christmas itself, this is why on Christmas Day I always have so much more fun if I'm doing things that are engaging me, sort of sensory things that are in line with my values, like where I'm connecting with people through board games and smells and tastes and laughter and those kind of things. So I think making sure that we're spending Christmas Day right, not just kind of, for me, the worst Christmas Day would be sitting in front of the TV watching episode after episode of what, Wallace and Gromit or whatever's on. So I think, it's about, for me, it's soothing in line with my values, what's important to me, what engages me, what drags me into the experience. And it's definitely those Christmas smells, those Christmas tastes, those board games, that fun, that laughter that I really thrive for.
nice, nice. Right, just to keep an eye on time, we've
Mm,
probably got, I must admit, I did forget to start the timer at the start. I think I was about
okay.
5 minutes short, so
No
I'd
problem.
predict we've got about
So
10 minutes
we're at,
left for
we're
the
at
hour.
51 minutes, and the
Oh,
feedback we had is that 50, is pretty digestible. Are there any more main points about strategies that we've not hit on yet that you think would be important for us to cover?
the only thing, and it's very much echoing what you've just said, but if I could just say it because it's buzzing around my
Of course,
head,
of course.
which is basically, as Tom just said, it's in order to soothe myself, I have to engage with my values in a way which is almost like suitable for me. I can't passively just watch TV. I've got to occupy my mind and sort of do something, it sounds like. And I just wanted to echo that and say, really do reflect on your values on these days because a lot of this day is outside of our control, like the way other people are being, everything's really outside of our control. Um, and that can be really hard. So what always remember what is in your control is your behavior in this particular moment. So if you feel rubbish, we want to just check in and say, well, what would if I was in charge of taking care of myself today, right now, what would I get myself to do? How would I steer my own ship? And hopefully it can lead you away from these kind of unhelpful coping strategies, like doom scrolling in bed for hours on end, for example, and into something which is just meaningful to you. So maybe it's just a hot shower, maybe it's some downtime, maybe whatever. Maybe it is going and spending some time with people, but just really reflecting on what's in your control during these difficult moments, and then realigning yourself with like those values and just pushing yourself gently into those directions is a really good coping strategy for these hard times. That's
Thank you
what I
very
would.
much. Thank you.
Mm.
So I hope the message has come across for us that it's okay if Christmas isn't perfect. It's okay if you feel disconnected. But hopefully we've given you some ideas for things you can try and do and things to reflect on that will help you be a part of this experience in the right way for you. Tom, what's your summary of this so far? If we think about our outro, how have you found what we've talked about?
It's been really good. I think it's to normalize Christmas as being a difficult day is just essential. I know it's kind of been done as well. This isn't
Mm.
like new news, but why not reiterate it? It's still relevant. I mean, it's always going to be completely relevant. So just normalizing that experience. I suppose we're sort of like anti John Lewis adverts on
Mhm.
this. We're the antidote to John Lewis adverts. Although if John Lewis do want to sponsor these podcasts, they are very welcome.
Yes, please get in touch.
I
We need new
Please.
equipment. Tom needs better Wi-Fi
And more Baileys.
and more Baileys. Gosh, yeah.
Um, but yeah, so we're just hammering that point home. It's okay to struggle on Christmas, and most importantly, you're not alone, and don't think for a second that you are.
Thank you. And we always set ourselves homework, Tom. I know we didn't reflect on it our last
Yeah.
one, but my homework is to spend Christmas mindfully and be present and to enjoy it and in line with my senses. And I think that's going to mean to really tap into what's going on around me. Where's the laughter? Where's the smells? Where's the taste? You know, how do I be in this moment? But to remember that I can't sustain that all the time, especially on a challenging Christmas like it's going to be for me this year. So also to think about, where do I need my gaps? Where are my pauses? Where are my stops? And how do I cope with that? And how do I make sure I give myself permission and respect that?
Okay, nice. I think mine's going to be to respect my own social battery and boundaries, and equally to let myself rest where I feel like I should be busy. Those are my two goals.
Sounds great. Great. So, Tom, that brings us to the end of today. Unless there's any final points you'd like to add.
No, that's all from me. Thank you.
Okay. So again, just a huge thank you to everybody who's listened today. I hope that there have been some helpful points to normalize some things, but also to think about what you can do to help yourself. Do get in touch, collaborate with us, drop us messages on this podcast, through Spotify or Apple Podcasts. We see all the comments. Drop us a message on social media, whether it's the Instagram accounts or whatever you need, and let us know, is there anything we've missed? Is there anything that you do around Christmas to cope that we've left out of this that you think is really important? Because we'd love to hear from you. This is our last drop before Christmas. We are going to be dark for the next few weeks. I've always wanted to say that. We're going to be dark for the next few weeks, but there is going to be a mini episode dropping around New Year, so do keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, we're wishing you all a very happy holiday season and a Merry Christmas to all.
Merry Christmas.
And to all, a good night.